Let's talk to Jamie Jenkins, who is our favourite man in Welsh Wales, and of course our favourite statistician as well. Jamie, very good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Mike. I'll have a glass of the ginger growl, please, if you've got any on offer.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's in it though. I'm sort of frightened to ask, to be honest. But Pooch will give us a clue at some point, I'm sure, as to what the ingredients are for the ginger growl. But let's talk about Wales, because obviously we're only a week away now from the local elections. There's an awful lot of interest in what happens in Wales, not least because it could be that for the first time ever, Labour become the third party and lose control of it altogether. Plaid looking as if they're in the driving seat. I mentioned to you the other day that it looked like a poll suggested that reform might be kind of coming up on the rails, but you're not sure that's really something that's going on, right?
Yeah, so for months, Mike, Reform and Plaid Cymru have been kind of neck and neck in the polls. Some polls put Reform in the lead, some
Yeah.
polls put Plaid Cymru in the lead. The poll that came out, I think, this week, putting Reform in the lead. They did have Reform quite ahead in the Caerphilly by-election that we had back end of last year. And so what happened when we had the Caerphilly by-election is Plaid Cymru won. I think Reform's biggest problem, Mike, is that many of the people who support Reform are people who are a bit disillusioned with the mainstream politics, and they don't tend to get out and vote. And what we've got in Wales, Mike, which people probably won't be surprised if they live here, is that even though it's a national Welsh Parliament election, we've never had more than half the population bother voting. People just can't be arsed, Mike, just voting for these things. And I think when I'm driving around, and you normally see placards around the place where I live in the Welsh valleys, you used to see obviously loads and loads of Welsh Labour placard. I've seen any, Mike. I don't think anybody will admit that they're still supporting the Labour Party and Keir Starmer. So I've seen none, literally none. But I'm not seeing much for other parties. I've seen a few Plaid Cymru ones, very few other ones, Mike. And so my prediction for next week, Plaid Cymru probably will be the largest party. Reform are doing well. I think Reform's biggest challenge, obviously, is this just most of the candidates at the front end for Reform are former Tories. So if you want to vote for the Tory party in Reform, you may as well vote for the Tory party itself. So that's where we're at. But we're having loads of these leaders debates. So when you have the general election, Mike, and you see ITV, BBC, Channel 4 will have Starmer, Kemi Badenoch. We get our own version of that in Wales. They seem to be on every other bloody day here. And it's getting a bit of a bore fest, I think, now, Mike. So I think people will be glad when these elections are over.
Yeah, but I guess the question a lot of people will have, and I'm being asked that quite a bit as well, is that what difference will it make when you wait? I mean, I know it takes. I mean, I've never quite understood why it takes so much time to count the council election votes, because they're so much smaller than the general election, but they seem to take like 3 bloody days to get it all done. So we probably won't really have a final version of events, I suppose, until Monday after the weekend. But will anything change in Wales? I mean, do you feel as though if Plaid Cymru suddenly becomes the ruling party, will it make any difference?
Well, the thing is, Labour have never really had a majority in Wales, Mike, because of the system we've got here. They've always had to have some support from either the Lib Dems or Plaid, and there's been agreements between Labour and Plaid. Will it change? It's a big question. I don't think it's going to change much, because ultimately, Welsh politics and the calibre of the politicians who are standing is absolutely dire, Mike. Most of these people, I always challenge to people when I talk about this, how many people who are standing would earn a job earning, say, a minimum of 80 grand a year in the private sector? Very, very few of them. I think a lot of it is a bit of a jolly to get a nice taxpayer-funded job, and they haven't got a clue. And if they were talented, they'd be working in the private sector. So, I think ultimately, you've seen the state of the UK overall with the Labour Party. We needed the Labour Party to come in, I suppose, with Starmer. And remember, he got fewer votes than Corbyn. In part, Starmer's destroying the Labour Party. People are needed to wake up. We obviously had the poor Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak era. Starmer's come in and shown how terrible the Labour Party is. So I think for Wales, people won't realise how bad the Plaid Cymru are until they're given some chance to show how bad they actually are. It's a similar story, Mike, with the Green Party. They might end up propping up Plaid Cymru. We had Zach Polansky this week saying he hopes Plaid Cymru gets in. He's hoping to do a deal with him if he needs a few extra support in terms of getting budgets and things through. So will things change, Mike? No, I think ultimately maybe they don't do the count in Wales the same night. Actually, they do all the votes and then they lock them all up and everybody goes to bed. That's literally what it's like in Wales. They don't even bother starting to count them overnight, which is absolutely bonkers as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe what will happen in the next sort of 5 years or so is that you'll find yourself having a massive increase in the population. I mean, we're seeing a story today that there's massive kind of riots almost going on in Spain because the Spanish government said that we're going to give 500,000 visas away to anybody coming here from Africa or points, south, east, west or north, Most of those people probably are going to end up staying in Spain, but an awful lot of them might also make it to France and might also make it here. There was a story from the ONS this week that said something like 7.5 million migrants are going to come here in the next 10 years. It's going to be offset to some extent by 5.5 million people leaving the country. But in the end, we're going to end up with, even if their numbers are right, another 2.5 million people living here who have come from overseas.
Yeah, and I've just published this morning, Mike, on my Substack, so people can get over. Just Google Stats Jamie, and then I think on the screen they can see my web address about this one, Mike. And so what the ONS does every couple of years is they do a set of population projections, and they're an important set of figures because I used to work at the ONS with the teams who produce these figures, and they're important because basically when the government or local authorities or just anything, the NHS, even businesses themselves, they need to plan for the future. So we need to kind of get an estimate as to how many people we think we're going to be there nationally and also locally as well. And so what we've got, Mike, here in these latest set of figures, they are down on what they thought 2 years ago, because when we had the big massive Boris wave of immigration, I think the ONS was assuming that we were going to literally every single year into the future have a net migration figure of 340,000, which is massive. They've revised that down based on the latest policies and the latest trends down to around 230,000 people. But that's still a lot of people, Mike, every single year net migration to the country. Remember under the Tories in the 2010s, it was tens of thousands. That seems to have gone away. So what the figures are showing, another 1.7 million people will add to the population by 2034, entirely driven by migration. We lose about 500,000 people because we got more deaths than we have births. And we need a grown-up debate on this, Mike, because we talk about AI is going to replace some jobs. Well, we don't need the migration then for the word part of that. We've got massive house problems in terms of the affordability for people, and that impacts on people having children, Mike. So the reason there's fewer children is people aren't living together as early as they used to. And then back in 1997, when you try to buy a house, your average earnings was about 3.6 times. So the house price was 3.6 times your average earnings. That's now over 7. It's about 7.6. It's come down in the last couple of years. But we can't continue to run a country with all this mass migration. And the shocking stories we hear, we don't know who half these people are. You've got the legal migration. But, a lot of people who seem to come to this country don't kind of bed in with a way of life that we have in this country.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, talking of which, there's an amazing stat in the papers today, which I think you will be, like me, not surprised at all to hear, which is a piece in the Times. It's a report being put out by, I think it's Trading Standards, who have basically said that half of convenience stores and a quarter of fast food takeaways up and down the country, and includes Wales as well as England, are apparently run by organised crime. Well, blow me over with a feather, I mean, this is not exactly news to me. Coastal towns from Dorset to Hampshire to Sussex, Liverpool apparently is really bad, surprisingly enough. Hull, Grimsby, the Chartered Trading Standards Institute say that, there's dodgy shops up and down the country. Well, really? Well, you don't need to do a survey to do that. I mean, even in my little tiny town in Sussex, there's 3 now Turkish barber shops, there's a vape shop, and there's about 3 empty kind of storefronts that nobody can actually afford to run because the government and the council are charging so much money for business rates that nobody can afford to run a business there.
No, in the village just over the road from where I live, Mike, I think it's a port in Rhondda and Tafia. I think there was some story that it was 13 barber shops it's only a small one.
And there's never anyone in them, right? I mean, you don't need to go to a barber's, do you? You haven't got any hair.
I need to go to one, Mike. I run my own hairdressing salon. I do my own hair, Mike.
But I mean, there's no market there for you, mate.
No, it's certainly not, mate. But no, it's absolutely bonkers. And the BBC, fair play to them, they've done a few investigations on this because they've gone what you find with these kind of these dodgy outlets is you go in there and I don't know, say a packet of cigarettes costs about 14, 15 pounds, but under the counter they'll have cigarettes that you can buy for £7, which are
Yeah.
kind of being run by all these organised crime. No duty being paid, so the government doesn't get a single penny from this. And I've heard of stories, Mike, as well, where people keep saying about smashing these gangs and how can they afford to give these gangs money to come over on the boats? Well, some of these people who do come over on the boats, Mike, they don't give a penny to the smugglers because they smuggle them in, and then their payment is going to work in these
Exactly,
organised crime.
and they're either working in a brothel or a nail bar or a barber's shop or delivering drugs, whatever it is they're doing. And I mean, I don't know why people find this so extraordinary. I mean, I've been saying this for years. I've been saying nobody's giving a lot of the smugglers $4.5 to come here. They're just enslaving themselves so that when they get here, they then owe them $4.5, which they then have to work off, which probably takes for the rest of their lives, right?
Yeah, and what did I think we talked about this months ago? And what was the government solution to all this, Mike? A digital ID. If people are literally smuggling themselves into the country, selling dodgy tobacco, probably drugs as well, do they really care about having a digital ID? Of course they don't. And Darren,
but it's like saying, all these people that drive around in cars without insurance, we're going to crack down on everyone who's got insurance by charging them more money. And like the people who don't buy insurance are already not buying it, so they're never going to be affected by it, are they?
Oh no, totally, Mike. And that's it. So digital ID still hasn't gone away. I think Darren Jones was down in Australia trying to. Why the hell he's charging a taxpayer for a government-funded trip to Australia to talk about some system they've got down there?
Yeah.
He should do some PR on that. So that hasn't gone away. I was down with I think you had Alan Miller on quite regularly, Mike, and I was down the Welsh Parliament last week talking about this. There's a little bit of a protest down there across Wales, Belfast, London, and up in Edinburgh, and that one hasn't got away, Mike. And so the question you posed me about will Wales get any better under Plaid Cymru? The problem we got is Starmer's literally on a life support machine. Well, the question back, I suppose, is would England and the rest of the UK get any better if bloody Angela Rayner takes over from Starmer, Mike? That's probably even worse. What do you think?
Yeah, I would have thought so. Here's a question for you, and you may not know the answer to this, and it's not a massive test, but this Trading Standards report has named the counterfeit capital of Europe. What do you think it is?
Oh, the counterfeit Liverpool?
It's Manchester, a place called Cheetham Hill. Cheetham Hill, Manchester, apparently is the counterfeit capital of Europe. That's 206 criminal establishments closed, £1.56 billion worth of counterfeit goods seized in the last year alone.
Yeah, and on that, and all that stuff, Mike. It doesn't. All this kind of we call it kind of the dark economy.
Yeah.
It doesn't generate any money for us in terms of tax. So the more migration and the more that we have all of this illegal counterfeit stuff going on, it's literally money that's pissing out the country, probably going abroad to criminal gangs as well. And which government, Mike, which party are talking serious on sorting this out? That's the biggest problem we've got here. We've got 1.7 million more in a decade coming over. That's down. And it's important to remind people where we are as well, Mike. So remember we talked about this. So in between 2021 and 2024, under that Boris wave that keeps getting talked about because of that right to remain, and we've got that big issue coming up soon. 2.3 million net migration to the country, and then between 1981 and 2007, when things were a bit normal in this country, we had 2.2 million. So we had more people came in the last 3 years between 21 and 24 than in the whole period between 1981 and 2007. We need a grown-up debate. The country, I think, needs to get to a point, Mike, where it's not got any net migration. You need a reset, zero net migration, until all the services, until the public has got the facilities, the GPs, the doctors, to be able to have a healthy, sustainable living standards in this country. Some government needs to wake up, smell the coffee, and get that sorted, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely right. Jamie, great to talk to you as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Jamie's going to be on Plank of the Week this week as well, so look forward to that on Friday night, going out at 7 o'clock. Of course, we'll be recording that a little bit later on this week.